Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering colleges. Woke colleges panic as Trump signs executive order to end DEI. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. On a scale of 1 to 10 for how aggressive Trump could be trying to get DEI out of colleges and universities, this is just about a 10. Trump's new executive order seeks to dismantle DEI policies in higher education, putting universities at risk of losing federal funding if they don't comply. This is not like losing a job. These are federal funds that these universities absolutely need to operate. It's not like fun money. They need these funds to keep their operation going. Trump's executive order directs the Attorney General and Education Secretary to enforce race-neutral policies in hiring, scholarships, and admissions. And that's pretty severe, but that's not all. Universities that receive federal aid are now reclassified as subcontractors of the federal government, meaning they must follow strict civil rights laws against race-based considerations. So in all of their actions and decision-making, it's the same as if they were any other federal contractor. If they violate the law, they're going to be violating their federal contract with the federal government. That's a whole new level of scrutiny on their actions. 9 elite universities with billion-dollar endowments, including Ivy League schools, are being targeted for investigations into their DEI programs. And that's not going to end well for them. Republicans and conservative activists have been making the point that DEI programs promote discrimination and should be abolished to restore merit-based admissions. And this is not just a suggestion. This was already decided by the Supreme Court. Democrats and DEI advocates claim this is an attack on decades of civil rights progress and will harm marginalized students the most. Some universities, like the University of Michigan, have already begun scaling back DEI programs in anticipation of federal scrutiny of their actions. Legal experts say the order's vague wording leaves room for lawsuits and challenges, which could delay or weaken its enforcement. And the great thing about that vague wording is it leaves openings to interpretations. And within those openings of interpretations, Trump's people will defend their cases. You can be very specific. You can be less specific. The less specific you are sometimes, that gray area is where you can get what you want. And it also creates the sandbox for where any litigation is going to take place. It's going to be kind of within whatever those vague areas are. That can benefit both sides. Universities in red states are the most likely to comply with Trump, while blue states are most likely to resist or attempt to work around his order. The final long-term impact is uncertain, but the order has already caused fear and disruption in higher education, with many institutions scrambling to adapt. And scrambling is exactly where Trump seems to want his opposition. From inside higher ed, Trump takes aim at DEI in higher ed. The executive order doesn't have an immediate impact on DEI programs at colleges and universities. But experts worry about a chilling effect, because the executive order initially just orders federal agencies to get organized and start to plan actions against these colleges and universities. That is a normal thing. That's how these things operate. It's gathering the resources to put on the attack. Trump has also frozen financing for the National Institute of Health, not allowing them to issue grants to fund medical research. He wants his people who are in charge to look at what they're doing. And he's also doing the same kind of thing with foreign aid right now, freezing all foreign aid until his people are appointed, installed, and in control of where monies are going to see that it is in context with and part of the plans of the federal government, not people inside the federal government doing whatever they want with the people's money. So it's not just in colleges and universities, it's throughout the federal government. But eliminating DEI is really important to the Trump administration. One of President Donald Trump's latest executive orders aims to end illegal diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and could upend programs that support underrepresented groups on college campuses. Whether the order will be effective is not clear, according to some experts. Others celebrated it as the end of DEI in America. One thing about Trump is he's focused on results. If this one executive order isn't effective for some reason, which I believe it's very likely it will be effective exactly as it is, it doesn't matter to him. He'll have 5 more executive orders, 15 more executive orders, 106 more executive orders, however many it takes. And if executive orders don't do it, he'll have other investigations, which he's already calling for, through the Attorney General's Civil Rights Division. Because you cannot illegally discriminate against people, even if you think it's a really good idea and it's fair. You can't do that, especially now not as a reclassified federal contractor. That's a whole other level of responsibilities to live up to if you're a university and you like receiving millions of federal dollars. The order calls on all federal agencies to enforce our long-standing civil rights laws and to combat illegal private sector DEI preferences, mandates, policies, programs, and activities, though it doesn't define DEI. Additionally, the order directs the Attorney General and Education Secretary, neither of whom have been confirmed yet, to create guidance for colleges and universities on how to comply with the 2023 Supreme Court ruling, which banned the use of race-conscious admissions policies. The order, however, will not have any immediate direct impact on higher education, as most provisions require federal agency action to follow up on them. Higher education experts and diversity, equity, and inclusion advocates say it's difficult to know how far Trump's latest order against DEI will actually go. But they're certain it represents an attempt to reverse more than 50 years of civil rights work to promote equal access to the American education system. Of course, it's not about 50 years of civil rights work. It's about what they've been doing over the last 10 to 15 years to illegally discriminate against other Americans. University stakeholders add that Trump's ultimate goal is to amplify culture war issues and create a dichotomy between merit and hard work and programs that celebrate diversity and promote equitable access. Because not equal access, because equitable access. Access for everyone, regardless of their ability, but not everyone, only the people they want to give access to. But what I see is a broad attempt to remove everything that is associated with long-standing institutional efforts to desegregate the U.S. government and institutions like colleges and universities that are entangled with the government through federal financial aid, according to Brendan Cantwell, a professor of education at Michigan State University. But anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion activists, you might also call them anti-racist activists, see the order as a positive change that reminds colleges to teach students how to think rather than what to think. Quote, for too long, social justice warriors crusaded to mandate DEI in every corner of America. Instead of merit, skills, and ability, DEI devotees pushed policies that are antithetical to American exceptionalism. According to Republican Representative and House Education Committee Chair Tim Walberg, who said this in a statement, quote, from the classroom to the boardroom, Americans have felt the negative effects. Chris Rufo, a senior fellow at the conservative Manhattan Institute, said deconstruction of DEI is impending. Chris Rufo was also probably the singular person most responsible for getting rid of Claudine Gay and removing her from the head of Harvard University. Quote, tomorrow morning, the general counsels for every major corporation and university are going to be reading President Trump's executive orders on DEI and figuring out how they can avoid getting ruined by federal civil rights lawyers, according to Chris. Quote, huge changes imminent. Trump's latest DEI action builds upon other related orders regarding sex, race, and equity that he signed in the first 2 days of his second term, but this one has the highest likelihood of directly impacting higher education. That's in part because the order designates any institution that receives federal financial aid as a subcontractor. As subcontractors, colleges' employment, procurement, and contracting practices, quote, shall not consider race, color, sex, sexual preference, religion, or national origin in ways that violate the nation's civil rights laws, according to the executive order. Additionally, the Education Department must pick up to 9 colleges that have endowments worth more than $1 billion to investigate as part of an effort, quote, to deter DEI programs or principles. Harvard University, other Ivy League institutions, and more than 24 other colleges would be on the list for a potential inquiry. In another tweet from Chris Rufo, he says this, Dear Ivy League universities, you're officially on notice. Abolish DEI or get wrecked. Across the board, policy experts that Inside Higher Ed spoke with say that while it's clear what Trump seeks to do, it's uncertain exactly what will actually come to pass. He called the order's language broad and said much of its consequences will depend on what levers the department pulls for compliance, among other factors. Trump is not putting out an executive order like this to just kind of see how it goes. He's putting it out to send a message and put the wheels in motion to get a job done. And if this doesn't do it, he will send additional executive orders, put additional resources into it, additional pressure on these colleges and universities. They will comply. John Thansmith, Senior Vice President of Government Relations and National Engagement for the American Council on Education, said in a webinar that though the executive orders have created uncertainty, the directives don't change federal law and are subject to lawsuits. Quote, the things we're talking about aren't absolutes, he said. There's a lot of understandable concern, but some things haven't changed. Some things haven't changed. That's the confidence you're giving these people? Look, don't worry about it. It's not like Trump's going to seize your funding and throw you in some kind of a prison or something like that. And I don't think he's throwing anybody in any kind of prisons over something like this. But keep in mind, the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice is not under control of the DEI Biden advocates anymore. It's going to be Trump's people. In fact, a lot of it already is Trump's people. Emil Bove, John Sauer, Trump's own personal lawyers are already at the Justice Department doing Justice Department things. Harmeet Dillon will be in charge of the Civil Rights Division. They're already cleaning house over there. They're turning it upside down. So a lot of things are going to change, and they're going to change fast. On the other hand, Adam Kissel, a visiting fellow of higher education reform at the Conservative Heritage Foundation, said, the order's implications are very clear. Quote, colleges and universities, as well as other institutions, are on notice that the DEI party is over. One way that the Trump administration can try to ensure the DEI party is fully brought to a halt is by telling colleges that the Supreme Court's ruling on race-conscious admissions policies extends to any scholarship program or student support services that are geared towards a specific race or ethnic group. Colleges that don't comply could risk their access to federal financial aid. Federal financial aid for tuition for college students. Do you think they're going to play around with that? Some legal analysts and Republican officials have argued that the Supreme Court's ruling also bars scholarships, internships, and other educational programs that take race into account. The Biden administration disagreed and said the ruling only affected admissions. And that's great when you're breaking the law and you're in the Biden administration, but now that you moved over to the Trump administration, that may not be so great if you're breaking the law. Kissel said he's 200% sure the Trump administration has the ability to extend the ruling from the Supreme Court to more than just admissions. Quote, the Supreme Court said discrimination is wrong and illegal under the Equal Protection Clause as well as Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, he said. And when we're talking about non-discrimination, I think SCOTUS was very clear that the broad interpretations are correct. The Supreme Court decision is also being used in civil cases that have absolutely nothing to do with college admissions against companies, and companies are caving. Everyone knows it's illegal. The question is whether or not these institutions get away with it. Kissel expects that the Trump administration will tie DEI compliance to both research grants and Title VI of the Higher Education Act of 1965, which authorizes federal financial aid programs. He believes they have the clearance to do so, as DEI is, in his view, discriminatory, and colleges accessing federal funds cannot discriminate. Regardless of the clarity level, a key factor that could determine the impact of the DEI order is how university leaders respond. Cantwell said the response from leaders will depend on whether the university is private and what state it's located in. He expects the order to carry more force at public colleges in Republican-led states. The government has the least control over private universities, he said, and though some dollars come from the federal government, much of higher ed funding is allocated at the state level, giving local lawmakers the most leverage on whether to enforce Trump's rules. I'm not going to tell you I'm some attorney that is very familiar with federal block grants for financial aid or anything like that. But I will say, if there is some restriction on the federal government providing funds for financial aid based on settled law from the Supreme Court, I don't think they're going to have a problem getting control of these blue states either. Financial aid is very important for students. It's very important for colleges. And it's a great way to get them to follow the laws. Although blue states that disagree with the president's order may be less likely than red states to pass legislation enforcing the guidelines, some universities could act on their own. Some institutions, such as the University of Michigan, have already started to rethink their DEI programs in an effort to preemptively comply with federal directives. Well, the case of Michigan does hint at some wariness, Campwell said, and that wariness and sort of preemptive compliance, even absent direct threats from the federal or state government, might be somewhat universal, but I also think we will definitely see lots of variation by state. Sarah Hubbard, a Republican-elected regent at the University of Michigan, said the latest executive order shows that Trump is doing exactly what he said he'd do, and should be a sign that more steps need to be taken in order for Michigan and other public institutions to avoid losing billions in federal funds. Michigan has already repealed the use of diversity statements in the hiring process and adopted a policy of institutional neutrality, but has not directly cut staff or funding for its highly criticized DEI programs. Those decisions would be made in the upcoming budget cycle. Quote, not speaking on behalf of the board, I hope that we will be doing more to realign our campus toward needs-based scholarships and removing overbearing DEI bureaucracy, according to Hubbard. Some higher education experts, particularly those working in and around DEI departments, are bracing for it to have a gigantic impact on students and faculty. Caleb Briscoe, that's this lady, is an assistant professor of adult and higher education at the University of Oklahoma, whose recent research has focused on the repercussions of DEI bans. She said that the order has already sent shockwaves, adding that her phone is blowing up about it. Although the action does not explicitly say it will ban or restrict DEI programs like some state-level laws, Briscoe believes that Trump's campaign messages and record from his first term speak loudly. Among other actions, Trump issued an executive order defunding any federally funded trainings or programs that promote race or sex stereotyping or scapegoating. Biden, of course, rescinded that order. Quote, the language within the executive order does not directly call for banning DEI, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be misinterpreted or used by policymakers to come up with additional bans, she said. Sean Harper, a professor of education, business, and public policy, and the founder of the University of Southern California's Race and Equity Center, so you know this is some kind of character, and an opinion contributor to Inside Higher Ed, said the order will surely frighten university administrators. It will likely lead to the preemptive hiding, renaming, or discontinuation of their DEI initiatives, he added. Well, these leaders will be worried about losing their federal funding, which is exactly what DEI opponents want. That is correct. Heterosexual Christian white men will likely feel supported and affirmed by Trump's anti-DEI orders, as, quote, too many of them have been tricked into misunderstanding DEI initiatives to be unfair, universal attacks. If any of these DEI initiatives were something that people shouldn't be insulted, and if they really were valid or reasonable or not delusional, they made a really bad case of trying to sell their racism on people. We're not buying it. In the meantime, Harper said that minority students will face increased harassment, discrimination, and violence, and will be left stranded without justice. They can just call the cops like anyone else if anything that happens would be illegal. But of course, he's not talking about that. He's talking about if you don't embrace what they call anti-racism, which is actually racism, then that's somehow violence. It becomes ridiculous. Briscoe echoed Harper, adding that as the number of DEI-focused staff members dwindles, faculty members will be left to pick up the pieces. Quote, we're looking at a very uphill climb of faculty having to take on more student affairs. Diversity professional roles, she said. Staff may not exist, but these students' needs will not have changed. Paulette Granberry Russell, president and CEO of the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, said the order is deeply concerning, mischaracterizes DEI, and takes aim at the core mission of higher education. Quote, by attacking the important work of diversity, equity, and inclusion offices at educational institutions, the order seeks to dismantle critical support systems for historically underrepresented students, she said. Quote, this would limit workforce preparation and stifle efforts to address systemic inequities. This order depicts diversity, equity, and inclusion as divisive, when in reality, these initiatives aim to ensure opportunity for all. You know, it doesn't matter what you claim your intentions are. When you're doing clearly illegal things, eventually you're going to get caught. And when you get caught, you're going to get dealt with by the law. Granberry Russell added that while the order's imminent impact will depend on how agencies enforce it, it's already causing uncertainty and fear. Quote, I hope that university leaders will recognize that executive orders should not dictate the values and priorities of higher education institutions, she said. Many colleges and universities have long-standing commitments to fostering inclusive environments, and I hope they will continue to uphold these principles despite political headwinds. It's not political headwinds. The Supreme Court has already ruled on all of this. The people have ruled on all of this. We have laws against all of this. Enough is enough. It's time to cut it out. The nonsense is over. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.